The rain came down hard on New Montana that night like angry tears from the dark sky above. Jake Morrison stood by his kitchen window watching the storm tear across his ranch land. Lightning split the darkness every few seconds, showing him glimpses of his cattle huddled together under the few trees that dotted his property. He had been running this ranch for 15 years now and had seen plenty of storms, but this one felt different, somehow more violent and angry than usual. The ranch house sat on a small hill overlooking thousands of acres of grassland that stretched to the horizon. Jake had built this place with his own hands after buying the land from the colonial government when New Montana first opened for settlement. The house was simple, but solid, with thick walls that could stand up to the worst weather the planet could throw at it. Tonight those walls were getting tested as wind howled around the corners and rain hammered against the reinforced windows. Jake took a sip of his coffee and checked the time on his wrist display. Nearly midnight, and the storm showed no signs of letting up. His foreman Danny Cruz had warned him that this weather system would be bad, but Jake had not expected it to be this fierce. The weather satellites had predicted heavy rain, but not this kind of violence from the sky. He made a mental note to check on the cattle in the morning and see if any of them had been injured by flying debris. The coffee was getting cold in his hands when he heard something that made him freeze. 3 sharp knocks on his front door cut through the sound of the storm like a knife. Jake set down his mug and listened carefully. The knocks came again, louder this time and more urgent. Someone was out there in this weather and they needed help. Jake walked to the front door and checked the security screen. The display showed a figure standing on his porch, but the rain and darkness made it hard to see clearly. The person was small and seemed to be swaying slightly as if struggling to stay upright. Jake could see water dripping from their clothes and forming puddles on the wooden deck. He opened the door and found himself looking at a young woman who appeared to be in her early 20s. Her dark hair was plastered to her head, and her clothes were soaked through. She was shivering badly and looked like she had been walking in the storm for hours. Her face was pale and drawn with exhaustion, but her eyes were alert and focused, despite her obvious distress. The woman looked up at Jake with those sharp eyes and spoke in a voice that was steady despite her condition. She told him her name was Lisa Carter and that she was looking for work. She said she had been traveling from settlement to settlement trying to find employment and had heard that his ranch might need extra hands. The storm had caught her on the road, and she had walked the last 5 miles to reach his place. Jake studied her face in the porch light and saw something there that made him hesitate. Her hands were calloused and rough, like someone who had done hard physical work, but there was something else about her that did not quite fit. The way she stood, despite being exhausted, suggested military training or at least some kind of combat experience. Her eyes never stopped moving as she talked, constantly scanning the area around them as if watching for threats. Despite his concerns, Jake could not leave anyone out in weather like this. He stepped aside and invited her in, telling her to get warm by the fire while he found some dry clothes. Lisa entered the house and immediately positioned herself where she could see both the front door and the windows. She thanked him politely, but Jake noticed that she never fully relaxed even as she warmed herself by the fireplace. Jake brought her some of his late wife's clothes that he had kept in storage. Lisa changed quickly and returned to the living room, looking more human but still maintaining that alert, watchful posture. Jake made fresh coffee and offered her some food, which she accepted gratefully. As she ate, he asked her about her background and experience with ranch work. Lisa told him she had grown up on a farm and knew how to handle livestock. She said she was good with machinery and could fix most equipment that broke down. When Jake asked about references, she hesitated before saying she had been traveling alone for a while, and her last employer was too far away to contact easily. Jake sensed there was more to her story, but decided not to push for details. The storm continued to rage outside as they talked. Jake found himself oddly comfortable with this stranger despite the mysterious circumstances of her arrival. There was something about Lisa that inspired confidence, even though she was clearly hiding something about her past. She answered his questions about ranch work with knowledge that went beyond what most drifters would possess. When Jake mentioned some of the challenges he faced running such a large operation, Lisa offered suggestions that showed surprising expertise. She talked about rotation schedules for grazing areas, and mentioned specific breeds of cattle that would do well in New Montana's climate. Her knowledge seemed to come from actual experience rather than just book learning. As the night wore on, Jake made a decision that surprised even himself. He offered Lisa a job as a ranch hand starting the next morning if the storm cleared. He explained that he had been short-handed since his last worker left and could use someone with her apparent skills. The pay would be fair, and she could stay in the bunkhouse with the other hands until she got settled. Lisa accepted the offer without hesitation, but Jake noticed relief in her eyes that seemed to go deeper than just finding employment. It was as if she had been running from something, and his ranch represented safety as much as work. Jake decided not to ask too many questions for now. Everyone deserved a chance to start over, and Lisa seemed willing to work hard for that opportunity. QDCU, storm finally began to weaken as dawn approached. Jake showed Lisa to the bunkhouse and gave her blankets and basic supplies. He told her to rest and that he would introduce her to the other workers when they started their day. Lisa thanked him again, and Jake noticed that her gratitude seemed genuine and deeply felt. As Jake walked back to the main house, he wondered what kind of trouble might follow this mysterious woman to his ranch. Something about Lisa Carter did not add up, but his instincts told him she was not dangerous, at least not to him or his people. He had always been a good judge of character, and despite her secrets, Lisa felt like someone he could trust. The sun was beginning to rise over the grasslands as Jake finally went to bed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, and he had a feeling that hiring Lisa Carter would change things around the ranch in ways he could not yet imagine. But for now, he was content to give her a chance and see what kind of worker she would prove to be. The morning sun painted the grasslands gold as Jake walked toward the bunkhouse to check on his new employee. The storm had passed, leaving the air clean and fresh, but the ground was still muddy from all the rain. Jake could see his cattle scattered across the pastures, looking none the worse for their rough night. Steam rose from the wet earth as the sun began to warm everything up. Lisa was already outside when he arrived, dressed in work clothes and looking ready for whatever tasks he might have. She had found boots that fit reasonably well and had tied her hair back in a practical style. Jake noticed that she looked rested despite having only a few hours of sleep. Most people would still be exhausted after the night she had been through, but Lisa seemed alert and energetic. Jake introduced her to Pete Williams, his lead ranch hand who had been working the property for 8 years. Pete was a good man but suspicious of newcomers, especially ones who showed up in the middle of storms with no clear background. He looked Lisa up and down with obvious doubt written on his weathered face. Jake could see that Pete was going to take some convincing before he accepted the new hire. The first test came when they reached the main herd. One of the cows was limping and showing signs of distress. Pete started to examine the animal, but Lisa stepped forward and pointed out symptoms that the experienced ranch hand had missed. She identified what she called Kepler's syndrome, a disease that affected cattle on frontier planets when they ate certain native plants during wet weather. Pete had never heard of Kepler's syndrome and looked skeptical until Lisa described the progression of symptoms with medical precision. She explained that the condition was caused by alkaloids in the local vegetation that became concentrated when plants absorbed excess moisture. If left untreated, the cow would develop respiratory problems within days and could die within a week. Jake watched as Lisa examined the sick animal with gentle but confident hands. She seemed to know exactly what she was looking for, and her touch calmed the nervous cow. When she finished her examination, she recommended a specific treatment protocol that involved antibiotics and dietary changes. Pete grudgingly admitted that her diagnosis made sense based on what he was seeing. The treatment worked exactly as Lisa had predicted. Within 2 days, the cow was walking normally and showing no signs of illness. Pete started looking at the new hire with something approaching respect. Jake began to wonder where a drifter would learn about exotic livestock diseases that even his experienced hands did not recognize. Lisa proved herself in other ways over the following weeks. When the automated fence repair system broke down, she fixed it using techniques that impressed even Jake, who considered himself handy with technology. She seemed to understand the complex electronics intuitively and made modifications that actually improved the system's efficiency. Mary Johnson, the ranch cook, noticed other unusual things about Lisa. The young woman never seemed to sleep more than 3 or 4 hours a night, but was always fresh and ready to work in the morning. Mary had taken to watching from her kitchen window, and often saw Lisa standing guard duty around the bunkhouse long after everyone else had gone to bed. Lisa also displayed knowledge about things that seemed far beyond what a ranch hand should know. When Jake mentioned problems with his communications array, she offered suggestions about upgrading the signal processors that sounded like they came from someone with advanced technical training. She talked casually about orbital mechanics when discussing weather patterns, and seemed to know more about New Montana's geology than most planetary scientists. The real test came 3 weeks after Lisa arrived, when a pack of native predators threatened the cattle. New Montana had several species of large carnivores that occasionally attacked livestock, but usually stayed away from areas with strong human presence. This pack was different, though more aggressive and coordinated than normal predator behavior. Jake was in his office when Pete's voice crackled over the radio, reporting that something was stalking the cattle in the north pasture. By the time Jake reached the area, the attack had already begun. 6 large cat-like creatures with razor-sharp claws were working together to separate a young calf from the herd. The other cattle were panicking and scattering in all directions. Pete and 2 other hands were trying to drive off the predators with shock prods, but the animals were not responding to the usual deterrent methods. Jake pulled out his rifle and started looking for a clear shot, but the predators were moving too fast and staying too close to the cattle for him to risk firing. That was when Lisa appeared, moving faster than Jake thought possible. She had fashioned weapons from ranch tools, turning a metal rod into a spear and wrapping wire around her hands like fighting gloves. She moved through the chaos with impossible grace, dodging claws and striking back with precision that left Jake speechless. One predator leaped at Lisa from behind, but she spun around and caught it in midair, throwing it to the ground with strength that should not have been possible for someone her size. Another tried to flank her, but she seemed to know exactly where it was without looking, and struck it down before it could attack. Within minutes, all 6 predators were either dead or retreating, back toward the wildlands. Lisa stood among the bodies, breathing hard but showing no signs of serious injury. The cattle had already begun to calm down and gather back into their normal groupings. Pete, on the other hand, stared at Lisa with amazement and perhaps a little fear. Jake walked over to examine the dead predators and found that Lisa had killed them with surgical precision. Each strike had been placed exactly where it would do the most damage with minimal effort. This was not the work of someone who had gotten lucky or fought desperately for survival. This was the work of someone trained to kill efficiently and without hesitation. When Jake asked Lisa where she had learned to fight like that, she gave him a simple answer. She said she had picked up some self-defense skills during her travels and had faced predators before on other worlds. Her explanation was reasonable enough, but Jake could see in her eyes that there was much more to the story. Pete pulled Jake aside later and expressed his concerns about their new employee. He said no normal person could move that fast or fight that well without special training. Pete had served in the colonial military before coming to work on the ranch and recognized combat skills when he saw them. He worried that Lisa might be running from military justice or hiding some kind of criminal past. Jake listened to Pete's concerns but found himself defending Lisa despite his own growing suspicions. She had saved their cattle and possibly some of their lives during the predator attack. Whatever secrets she might be hiding, she had proven herself to be on their side when it mattered. Jake decided to give her the benefit of the doubt for now, while keeping a closer eye on her activities. That night, Jake found Lisa standing watch outside the bunkhouse again. He approached her quietly and asked if she expected more trouble. Lisa told him that predators rarely attacked in coordinated groups unless something was driving them to desperation. She suggested increasing security patrols and setting up additional sensor equipment around the ranch perimeter. Jake agreed to her suggestions and asked Lisa to help design the improved security measures. As they worked together over the following days, he noticed that she seemed to understand surveillance technology and tactical planning far better than any ranch hand should. Her proposals were sophisticated and thorough, showing knowledge of threat assessment and defensive positioning that came from professional training. Despite his growing certainty that Lisa was not what she claimed to be, Jake found himself trusting her more each day. She worked harder than anyone else on the ranch and never complained about difficult or dangerous tasks. She treated the other workers with respect and had already become popular with most of the crew despite Pete's continued suspicions. Jake realized that whatever Lisa was running from it had not changed her fundamental character. She was loyal, hardworking, and protective of the people around her. Those qualities mattered more to him than whatever secrets she might be keeping about her past. As long as she continued to be an asset to the ranch, he was willing to let her keep her mysteries. 6 months after the battle that changed everything, Jake stood in his newly rebuilt ranch house looking out at property that bore little resemblance to the simple cattle operation it had once been. The rolling grasslands were still there along with the livestock that provided their agricultural income. But new buildings and facilities had transformed the place into something that served a much larger purpose. The Morrison Carter security consulting firm had grown beyond anyone's initial expectations as word spread throughout the frontier about their unique services. Enhanced human capabilities combined with practical frontier experience created solutions for problems that conventional security companies could not address. Their client list included Federation outposts, civilian settlements, and even some corporate installations that needed protection from exotic threats. Lisa had adapted to her new role as a business owner with the same dedication she had once brought to military service. Her enhanced abilities made her an invaluable asset in the field, while her growing understanding of civilian needs helped shape services that actually solved problems rather than just applying military solutions to complex situations. Jake discovered that his skills as a rancher translated surprisingly well to managing a security consulting business. His experience dealing with frontier challenges and coordinating diverse groups of workers proved essential as their operation expanded to include former military personnel, enhanced humans, and civilian specialists from dozens of different worlds. Agent Barnes had officially transferred to New Montana and taken on the role of Federation liaison with enthusiasm that surprised her former colleagues. Her reports back to headquarters provided detailed documentation of enhanced human integration into civilian society, while her presence ensured that Federation interests were protected without compromising the independence of their operation. Pete Williams had embraced his position as operations chief with the same steady competence he had shown as ranch foreman. His ability to coordinate complex logistics while maintaining personal relationships with every employee made him indispensable as their workforce grew to include people with very different backgrounds and capabilities. Danny Cruz led training, programs that attracted students from across the galaxy who wanted to learn frontier defense techniques. His combination of practical experience and natural teaching ability created courses that were both effective and accessible to people without military backgrounds. The waiting list for his programs extended months into the future. Mary Johnson had transformed from ranch cook to facilities manager overseeing operations that fed, housed, and equipped dozens of personnel at any given time. Her talent for anticipating needs and solving problems with limited resources made her the unofficial heart of their growing community. The success of their integration model had attracted other enhanced humans who were seeking alternatives to military service or criminal exploitation. Jake and Lisa found themselves providing refuge and opportunity for people whose enhanced capabilities had made them outcasts in societies that feared what they did not understand. The legal precedents established by their business arrangements had implications far beyond New Montana as other worlds began developing their own programs for enhanced human integration. Lisa's status as a successful civilian contractor provided proof that people with extraordinary abilities could contribute to society without posing threats to public safety. But their greatest achievement was personal rather than professional. Jake had proposed to Lisa 3 months earlier in a ceremony witnessed by the entire ranch community. She had accepted with tears in her eyes and a smile that transformed her face from the careful mask she had worn as a fugitive to the open expression of someone who had finally found home. The wedding preparations had become a community project, with everyone contributing their skills and resources to create a celebration worthy of the couple whose love story had brought them all together. Mary Johnson coordinated catering that accommodated the dietary needs of humans from dozens of different worlds, while Pete Williams handled logistics that would have challenged a military operation. Agent Barnes had requested permission to officiate the ceremony in her capacity as a Federation representative, which created an unusual precedent for enhanced human marriages. Her presence would give their union official recognition while demonstrating the Federation's acceptance of Lisa's civilian status. The ceremony took place on a hill overlooking the ranch, with the rebuilt facilities serving as backdrop for an event that symbolized hope for the future. Representatives from throughout the star system attended, including officials who had once considered Lisa a dangerous fugitive and settlers who had learned to see enhanced humans as protectors rather than threats. Jake stood beside Lisa as Barnes conducted a ceremony that acknowledged both their individual achievements and their partnership in building something new. The vows they exchanged spoke of dedication, not just to each other but to the community they had created, and the principles they had defended together. Lisa's words during the ceremony moved many in the audience to tears as she spoke about finding acceptance and belonging after years of being treated as a weapon rather than a person. Her transformation from enhanced soldier to beloved community member represented possibilities that gave hope to others who struggled with similar challenges. Jake's vows focused on the courage required to build new institutions while maintaining the values that made their community special. His commitment to Lisa was also a commitment to continuing their work of proving that enhanced humans deserved the same rights and opportunities as anyone else. The celebration that followed the ceremony showcased the diversity of their community, as people from dozens of worlds shared food, music, and stories that highlighted their common humanity, despite their different origins. Enhanced humans danced with unmodified settlers while Federation officials shared drinks with former rebels who had found peace on the frontier. Pete Williams gave a speech that captured the feelings of everyone who had witnessed Jake and Lisa's journey from that stormy night when she first knocked on his door. He spoke about the courage required to trust strangers and the rewards that came from accepting people for who they chose to be, rather than what they had been created to do. Mary Johnson presented the couple with a gift that represented the entire community's investment in their future. She had organized contributions for a fund that would support expanded facilities for their growing operation, while ensuring that their agricultural heritage remained part of whatever they built together. Danny Cruz announced plans for a new training facility that would specialize in techniques developed specifically for mixed teams of enhanced and unmodified humans. His programs would spread their integration model to other worlds while providing economic opportunities for their community. Agent Barnes delivered an official message from Federation headquarters, recognizing the Morrison Carter Security Consulting firm as a preferred contractor for frontier defense operations. The designation came with substantial financial benefits, while providing official validation of their approach to enhanced human integration. As the celebration continued into the night, Jake and Lisa found themselves surrounded by people who had become their chosen family. The ranch hands who had accepted her, despite not understanding what she was, had proven that belonging was not determined by genetics or enhancement, but by the choices people made about how to treat each other. The success of their business venture provided security and purpose, but their personal relationship gave meaning to everything they had built together. Lisa had found not just work when she knocked on Jake's door, but a partner who valued her for qualities that had nothing to do with her enhanced abilities. Their wedding marked the beginning of a new chapter rather than the end of their story. Plans were already underway for expansion to other worlds, while their model of enhanced human integration continued to evolve and improve. They had proven that people with extraordinary capabilities could build ordinary lives filled with love, community, and purpose. Jake looked at his new wife surrounded by friends and colleagues who represented dozens of different worlds and backgrounds, united by their commitment to building something better than what they had found. Lisa had knocked on his door just needing work, but she had stayed to help create a future where enhanced humans and their unmodified neighbors could work together as equals. The stars above New Montana shone down on a celebration that represented hope for the galaxy's future as enhanced humans and natural humans learned to see past their differences to the common dreams that bound them together. Their wedding was proof that love could overcome any obstacle, including the barriers that divided people based on how they had been born or what they had been designed to do. The aftermath of the battle left New Montana's landscape scarred with the wreckage of alien ships and the burned remains of what had once been peaceful grazing land. Jake stood on his porch watching recovery teams from both Federation and local forces working together to clear debris and tend to the wounded. The alliance forged in combat had created bonds that would not easily be broken, despite the different uniforms and conflicting loyalties. Agent Barnes spent 3 days in extended communication with her superiors, trying to explain how a routine fugitive recovery mission had turned into a major military engagement with galactic implications. The Federation command was struggling to understand how their enhanced human prototype had not only evaded capture, but had also demonstrated capabilities that exceeded even their most optimistic projections for the program. Lisa worked alongside the recovery teams, using her enhanced strength to move wreckage that would have required heavy machinery for normal humans to handle. Jake noticed that she seemed more relaxed now that her true nature was known to everyone around her. The need for secrecy had been a burden that she was relieved to set aside, even though exposure brought new dangers. The cost of their victory became clear as damage assessments revealed the full extent of destruction to the ranch's infrastructure. The defense grid that Lisa had modified was completely destroyed, along with most of the automated systems that made large-scale cattle ranching profitable. The buildings had suffered extensive damage, and several of the water treatment facilities were beyond repair. Pete Williams approached Jake with concerns that went beyond simple property damage. The ranch hands were worried about their jobs and their future on New Montana, now that their home had become a battlefield. Word was spreading throughout the colony about the enhanced human living among them, and reactions ranged from curiosity to fear about what other dangers might follow. Mary Johnson had taken charge of feeding the various military personnel and recovery workers, but she confided to Jake that supplies were running low. The battle had destroyed much of their stored food and equipment, while the influx of people needing shelter and meals was straining resources that had been calculated for normal ranch operations. Barnes received new orders that complicated an already difficult situation. The Federation wanted Lisa to return to Earth for debriefing and evaluation with the promise that she would not face prosecution for her desertion. Instead, she would be offered a position as a civilian contractor, with full legal protections and compensation for her previous service. The offer sounded generous, but Jake suspected there were hidden conditions. Lisa read the Federation proposal carefully before discussing it with Jake in private. She pointed out that accepting their offer would make her a permanent asset of the military organization she had tried to escape. Even as a civilian contractor, she would be subject to recall for missions that could take her away from New Montana for months or years at a time. Jake found himself facing the possibility that Lisa would choose to leave the ranch voluntarily to protect him and his workers from future attacks. Her presence had already brought one alien assault, and there was no guarantee that other enemies would not follow. She felt responsible for the damage to his property and the danger to his people. The decision became more urgent when Barnes informed them that intelligence reports indicated several other factions were interested in acquiring Lisa's capabilities. The Kethmori Empire would certainly make another attempt, while human criminal organizations saw her as a valuable asset for illegal activities. The Federation could provide protection, but only if she agreed to return to their custody. Jake called a meeting of all ranch personnel to discuss their future and an honest conversation about the risks and benefits of different choices. He was surprised by the unanimous response from his workers, who declared their loyalty to both him and Lisa, regardless of whatever dangers might come. Pete Williams spoke for the group when he said they had all chosen to live on the frontier because they valued freedom over safety. Danny Cruz proposed an alternative that showed remarkable insight into the political realities they faced. He suggested that instead of hiding from Lisa's enhanced nature, they should embrace it openly and use her abilities to build something new. The ranch could become a center for training and development of frontier defense capabilities while maintaining its agricultural operations. Mary Johnson supported Danny's proposal with practical suggestions about how they could accommodate the additional personnel and activities that such an expansion would require. She had been calculating resource needs and believed they could make the new mission profitable while providing valuable services to other frontier settlements. Lisa listened to the discussion with growing amazement at the loyalty and courage of people who barely knew her true nature, but were willing to reshape their lives to help her find a place in their community. Their acceptance meant more to her than all the Federation's promises of official pardons and prestigious positions. Barnes found herself in an impossible position, as her superiors demanded results, while the people she was supposed to arrest, or recruit, showed no interest in cooperating with Federation authority. Her military training told her to follow orders, but her experience during the battle had shown her the value of the bonds that held the ranch community together. The breakthrough came when Lisa proposed a compromise that satisfied everyone's essential needs, while avoiding the conflicts that had seemed inevitable. She offered to establish a legitimate security consulting business based on the ranch that would provide services to both Federation forces and civilian settlements. This would give her official status, while allowing her to remain on New Montana. Jake immediately volunteered to become Lisa's business partner, providing the financial backing and administrative support needed to make their venture successful. His reputation as a successful rancher would give credibility to their new enterprise, while his knowledge of frontier conditions would help them understand client needs. Barnes surprised everyone by requesting assignment as the Federation liaison to their new security consulting firm. She argued that her experience during the battle qualified her to evaluate the effectiveness of enhanced human capabilities in realistic conditions. Her superiors agreed, partly because they wanted their own representative monitoring Lisa's activities. The legal framework for their new arrangement required extensive negotiations between Federation authorities and New Montana's colonial government. Lisa's status as an enhanced human created precedents that would affect other individuals with similar backgrounds throughout the galaxy. The agreements they reached became models for integrating enhanced humans into civilian society. Pete Williams accepted promotion to Chief of Operations for the expanded ranch facilities, while Danny Cruz became head of the training division that would prepare frontier settlers for defense against various threats. Mary Johnson took charge of logistics and support services for the growing operation that was attracting personnel from across the star system. The transformation of Jake's ranch into a multi-purpose facility required months of reconstruction and expansion, but the work provided employment for many people who had been displaced by the battle. Lisa's enhanced abilities proved invaluable in the construction process, while her tactical knowledge helped design facilities that could serve multiple functions. As their new business began operations, Jake realized that Lisa had found more than just refuge on his ranch. She had discovered a purpose that used her abilities for protection rather than destruction, while building relationships that gave her life meaning beyond military objectives. Their partnership was creating something that neither could have achieved alone. The success of their venture attracted attention from throughout the galaxy, as other enhanced humans began seeking similar opportunities to build civilian lives. Lisa and Jake found themselves at the center of a movement that was reshaping how society viewed people with extraordinary capabilities. Their ranch had become a symbol of hope for those seeking acceptance and belonging, but Jake knew that their success also made them targets for those who preferred to keep enhanced humans under strict control or who wanted to exploit their abilities for personal gain. The price of Lisa's freedom was eternal vigilance and the constant need to prove that enhanced humans could be trusted with the liberty that all people deserved. The second wave of Keth Mori ships arrived just as the sun disappeared behind New Montana's mountains, leaving the battlefield, lit only by weapon fire and burning wreckage. Jake counted 12 enemy vessels descending from orbit with the clear intention of ending the siege through overwhelming force. The alien commander had decided that subtlety was no longer necessary and was preparing to level the entire ranch to capture Lisa. Agent Barnes received urgent communications from the Federation fleet in orbit, reporting that they were under attack by a much larger Keth Mori force than anyone had anticipated. The enemy had brought enough ships to challenge the entire Federation presence in the star system, and were demanding the surrender of the enhanced human prototype in exchange for allowing the colonists to evacuate peacefully. Lisa monitored the communications through her neural interface and immediately understood that the situation had escalated far beyond a simple capture mission. The Keth Mori were treating her as a strategic asset worth risking an interstellar incident to acquire. Her genetic modifications and technological capabilities represented advances that could shift the balance of power in the ongoing galactic war. Barnes faced an impossible decision as reports came in of Federation ships being destroyed by superior alien technology. Her superiors in orbit were ordering her to surrender Lisa immediately to prevent further losses, while her troops on the ground were preparing for a final, desperate stand. The agent realized that following orders might save some lives but would also hand the enemy a weapon that could be used against humanity for generations. Jake listened to the communications with growing anger at the Federation's willingness to sacrifice his people to protect their military assets. The officials in orbit were treating the ranch workers as acceptable casualties in a political calculation that valued ships and resources over human lives. He began to understand why Lisa had chosen to desert rather than remain part of an organization that saw people as expendable. The breakthrough came when Lisa detected something in the alien communications that changed her entire perspective on the battle. The Kethmori ships were not operating under unified command but were split between two factions with different objectives. One group wanted to capture her alive for study, while the other preferred to destroy her rather than risk her escape again. Lisa shared this intelligence with Barnes and proposed a strategy that seemed insane but offered their only chance of survival. If they could exploit the division among the Kethmori forces, they might be able to turn the alien factions against each other. The plan required precise timing and coordination between forces that had been enemies just hours earlier. Barnes looked at the tactical situation and realized that Lisa's plan was their only hope against overwhelming odds. The Federation agent made a command decision that would probably end her career, but might save the lives of everyone on the ranch. She ordered her troops to work directly under Lisa's command and granted the enhanced human access to all Federation military assets in the system. The first phase of Lisa's plan involved using the ranch's communication array to broadcast false intelligence that made each Kethmori faction believe the other was planning to betray their alliance. Lisa's knowledge of alien psychology and communication protocols allowed her to craft messages that appeared authentic while sowing distrust between enemy commanders. Jake watched in amazement as the alien forces began turning their weapons on each other instead of continuing their assault on the ranch. The Kethmori ships engaged in fierce combat above the planet, while their ground forces received conflicting orders that left them confused and vulnerable. Lisa had turned the enemy's strength against itself, with nothing but carefully crafted deception. Pete Williams led a combined force of ranch hands and Federation soldiers in an attack on the confused alien ground troops. The human forces moved with coordination that would have been impossible without Lisa's real-time tactical guidance, transmitted through modified ranch equipment. Every attack was precisely timed to take advantage of gaps in the enemy's disorganized defense. Mary Johnson proved that courage was not limited to young soldiers when she used her knowledge of the ranch's underground storage areas to guide a strike team to critical enemy positions. The cook moved through tunnels that she had helped dig years earlier, emerging behind alien lines to plant explosive charges that disrupted their communication networks. Danny Cruz demonstrated leadership that earned him field promotion to lieutenant when he coordinated artillery strikes using modified farm equipment as improvised mortars. His intimate knowledge of distances and terrain features on the ranch allowed him to place shots with accuracy that impressed even the Federation military personnel working under his direction. The battle turned decisively when Lisa managed to hack into the Kethmori command systems and take control of several alien weapons platforms. Her neural interface allowed her to operate their technology more effectively than its original users, while simultaneously coordinating human forces through multiple communication channels. She had become a one-person command center, directing the entire defensive effort. Barnes found herself working alongside the person she had come to arrest, and discovering that her intelligence about Lisa had been deliberately falsified. The enhanced human was not a dangerous renegade, but a dedicated soldier who had refused to participate in morally questionable experiments. Her desertion had been an act of conscience rather than cowardice or treason. The Kethmori factions continued fighting each other with increasing intensity as Lisa fed them false intelligence designed to escalate their conflict. The alien forces that had seemed invincible when united were proving vulnerable when their coordination broke down. Their superior technology could not overcome the confusion and mistrust that Lisa had planted in their ranks. Jake realized that he was witnessing something that would be remembered in military history as an example of how intelligence and determination could overcome overwhelming odds. A small group of farmers and soldiers led by an enhanced human had defeated a force that should have been able to conquer the entire planet. Their victory was proof that humanity's greatest weapon was not technology, but the ability to adapt and unite against common threats. The climax came when Lisa successfully turned the main Kethmori battlecruiser against its own fleet, by convincing its commander that the other ships were planning to destroy him once they captured the enhanced human. The massive vessel opened fire on its allies with weapons that had been intended for use against Federation forces. The alien fleet began to disintegrate under friendly fire. As the surviving Kethmori ships retreated toward deep space, Barnes received new orders from her superiors in orbit. The Federation command had witnessed Lisa's performance during the battle and now wanted to negotiate terms for her voluntary return to service, rather than treating her as a fugitive. Her demonstrated abilities had made her too valuable to prosecute for past crimes. Lisa listened to the Federation's offer with the same careful attention she had given to their threats earlier, but Jake could see in her eyes that she had no intention of returning to a military organization that would use her as a weapon against any target they designated. She had found something on the ranch that was worth more than all the promises the Federation could make. Barnes faced her own choice between following orders that would advance her career and doing what she believed was right for someone who had saved all their lives. The agent looked around at the ranch workers who had fought beside her troops with courage that matched any military unit she had commanded. Their loyalty to each other and to Lisa was something that could not be manufactured or commanded. The immediate threat was over, but Jake knew that larger challenges lay ahead. Word of Lisa's abilities and their successful defense would spread throughout the galaxy, bringing attention that could threaten the peaceful life she wanted to build. They had won this battle, but the war for her freedom was just beginning. The Kethmori ships appeared on the horizon like dark storm clouds, bringing death instead of rain. Jake had never seen alien vessels before, but there was something about their organic curves and predatory design that made his skin crawl. The ships moved with fluid grace that suggested living creatures rather than manufactured machines, and their approach was clearly hostile. Agent Barnes stood frozen for several seconds as her training warred with the reality of facing an alien threat that her protocols had not prepared her for. The Federation had been at war with the Kethmori Empire for 3 years, but most combat took place in deep space, far from civilian settlements. Barnes had never expected to face enemy forces on a frontier agricultural world. Lisa broke free from her restraints with casual ease that shocked the Federation soldiers. The suppression devices that were supposed to contain her enhanced abilities sparked and failed as she overrode their systems through her neural interface. Barnes reached for her weapon but stopped when Lisa raised her hands to show she was not attacking, despite her newfound freedom. Jake watched as Lisa took command of the situation with authority that came from genuine military experience. She told Barnes that the Kethmori had been hunting her across the galaxy and would not hesitate to destroy everyone on the ranch to capture her. The aliens wanted her genetic modifications and technological interfaces for their own enhancement programs and would use any level of violence necessary to achieve their goals. The first Kethmori transport landed in Jake's south pasture before anyone could react. Alien soldiers emerged from the craft, moving with inhuman speed and coordination. They stood 7 feet tall with forearms that ended in claws designed for cutting through armor, and their faces were hidden behind helmets that glowed with targeting displays. Barnes realized that her Federation troops were about to face combat against an enemy that outclassed them in every category except numbers. The Kethmori soldiers carried weapons that fired energy bolts capable of melting through the Federation's standard body armor. Their enhanced physiology gave them strength and speed that made human soldiers look slow and fragile by comparison. Lisa proposed an alliance that should have been impossible given the circumstances. She offered to help coordinate the defense of the ranch, using her enhanced abilities and tactical knowledge in exchange for Barnes agreeing to protect the civilian population. Lisa pointed out that the Kethmori would kill everyone present regardless of their military status once they had what they came for. Barnes hesitated for only a moment before accepting Lisa's proposal. The Federation agent realized that her mission to capture Lisa had become irrelevant compared to the threat facing everyone on New Montana. She ordered her troops to take defensive positions around the ranch buildings, while Lisa began implementing a strategy that made use of every available resource. Jake found himself amazed by Lisa's transformation from quiet ranch hand to military commander. She moved through the defensive preparations with precision that showed extensive training in exactly this type of situation. Her enhanced senses allowed her to track enemy movements, while her neural interface gave her control over every electronic system on the ranch. Pete Williams and the other ranch workers took their positions with weapons that ranged from hunting rifles to improvised explosives made from farming chemicals. They were not soldiers, but they knew the terrain better than anyone and had strong motivation to defend their home. Lisa coordinated their efforts with the Federation troops, creating a combined force that was greater than the sum of its parts. The first attack came at sunset when the Kethmori moved to test the human defenses. Their soldiers advanced with tactics that showed they had studied human combat methods and developed counters for standard Federation strategies. But Lisa had anticipated their approach and prepared surprises that the aliens had not encountered before. The ranch's automated systems had been modified by Lisa into a sophisticated defense network that responded to her neural commands. Irrigation pumps became weapons that fired pressurized streams of acidic cleaning chemicals, while automated feeders launched explosive charges with precision that rivaled military targeting systems. The aliens found themselves facing a landscape that had been turned into a weapon. Jake took position in his ranch house with Mary Johnson and several other workers who were tasked with protecting the building that served as their command center. He could see the battle raging across his property through windows that Lisa had reinforced with metal plates salvaged from farming equipment. The sight of his peaceful home being turned into a war zone filled him with anger that surprised him. With its intensity, the Federation soldiers fought with courage, but it was clear that they were outmatched by the Kethmori in direct combat. Their weapons did damage, but the aliens absorbed punishment that would have killed human opponents while continuing to advance. Only Lisa's modifications to the ranch's defenses were keeping the enemy from overrunning their positions. Danny Cruz performed acts of heroism that earned him the respect of even the Federation veterans. The ranch foreman used his knowledge of the property to guide human forces through covered approaches, while leading attacks on alien positions that disrupted their coordination. His civilian clothes and improvised weapons made him look out of place on a battlefield, but his effectiveness was undeniable. Lisa moved through the combat zone like a force of nature, striking at key enemy positions with superhuman speed and precision. She could appear behind Kethmori lines before they realized she had moved, then disappear again before they could coordinate a response. Her ability to interface with alien technology allowed her to turn captured weapons against their former owners. The battle reached its climax when the Kethmori commander landed with reinforcements that threatened to overwhelm the human defenses. The alien leader was larger than his soldiers and carried weapons that fired explosive charges capable of destroying buildings with single shots. His presence on the battlefield changed the tactical situation in favor of the attacking forces. Barnes coordinated her remaining troops in a desperate attempt to hold their positions, but Jake could see that they were being pushed back toward the ranch buildings. The civilians would soon be exposed to direct attack, and their improvised weapons would be useless against the enemy's advanced technology. The defense was on the verge of collapse despite everyone's best efforts. That was when Lisa made a decision that changed everything. She told Barnes that she could stop the Kethmori advance but would need complete access to the Federation's communication systems and weapons. Barnes hesitated because granting that access would give Lisa control over military assets that she was not authorized to command. Jake spoke up in support of Lisa's request, pointing out that conventional tactics were failing and they needed to try something different if they wanted to survive. He reminded Barnes that Lisa had already proven her commitment to protecting the civilians and had not tried to escape despite having multiple opportunities. Barnes finally agreed to give Lisa the access she requested. Lisa interfaced directly with the Federation ships and their weapon systems, turning the orbiting vessels into platforms for precision strikes against enemy positions. Her enhanced neural capabilities allowed her to coordinate attacks with accuracy that no human pilot could match, while simultaneously managing the ground defense through the ranch's modified systems. The tide of battle turned as Lisa's coordinated strikes disrupted the Kethmori assault and forced the aliens to retreat to defensive positions. But Jake could see that this was only a temporary reprieve, because more enemy ships were approaching from space. The real test of their alliance was yet to come, and the stakes were higher than just the survival of his ranch. Barnes looked at Lisa with newfound respect, and perhaps the beginning of understanding about what the enhanced human truly represented. The Federation agent was starting to realize that her mission had been based on incomplete information, and that Lisa might be an asset rather than a threat. But there would be time for such considerations only if they managed to survive the next phase of the alien attack. 3 weeks after the storm, Jake was beginning to believe that life on the ranch might actually settle into a peaceful routine. Lisa had proven herself invaluable in ways that went far beyond her enhanced abilities. She worked harder than anyone else and had earned the respect of even Pete Williams, who had finally stopped questioning her presence. The ranch was running more efficiently than it had in years thanks to her improvements to their systems and procedures. That illusion of peace shattered when 3 Federation transport ships appeared in the sky above the ranch. Jake watched from his porch as the sleek vessels descended in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming silver in the afternoon sun. These were not cargo ships or passenger transports, but military vessels designed for rapid deployment of troops and equipment. The ships landed in Jake's north pasture with precision that spoke of extensive surveillance and planning. Soldiers in Federation uniforms emerged from the transports and immediately began setting up a perimeter around the landing zone. Jake counted at least 30 troops armed with weapons that could level his house if they chose to use them. Lisa appeared beside Jake before he realized she had approached. Her enhanced senses had detected the ships long before they became visible, and she had been preparing for this moment since their arrival. Jake could see tension in every line of her body as she watched the Federation forces organize themselves with military efficiency. A woman in officer's clothing separated herself from the troops and walked toward the ranch house. She moved with the confident stride of someone accustomed to command, and her cold eyes surveyed the property like she was already planning how to divide it up. Jake recognized the type from his dealings with colonial bureaucrats who treated frontier settlers like obstacles to be removed. The officer introduced herself as Agent Carol Barnes of the Federation Security Division. She had short blonde hair and a face that might have been attractive if not for the hardness in her expression. Barnes presented official documentation that authorized her to search the ranch for what she called a dangerous fugitive who posed a threat to galactic security. Jake examined the papers and found them properly signed and sealed by authorities he was required to respect. Barnes had legal justification for her presence, even though Jake suspected her real motives went far beyond simple law enforcement. When he asked about the specific nature of the threat, Barnes gave him answers that revealed how much the Federation knew about Lisa's true identity. Barnes told Jake that his employee Lisa Carter was actually a stolen military asset who had escaped from a secure facility after murdering her handlers. She claimed that Lisa possessed classified technology that could not be allowed to fall into enemy hands. The fugitive was considered extremely dangerous and required immediate containment using specialized equipment designed for enhanced humans. Jake listened to Barnes's accusations while watching Lisa's reaction. He could see anger building in her eyes, but also resignation, as if she had been expecting this confrontation for months. Lisa did not deny Barnes's basic facts, but Jake could tell there was much more to the story than the Federation agent was revealing. When Barnes demanded that Jake surrender Lisa immediately, he found himself facing an impossible choice. The legal documentation gave Barnes the authority to take Lisa by force if necessary, and Jake had no doubt that the Federation troops would carry out their orders without hesitation. But something about Barnes's manner and the speed of their response suggested this was more than a simple arrest operation. Lisa stepped forward and offered to surrender voluntarily if Barnes would guarantee the safety of Jake and his ranch workers. Barnes agreed to the terms, but Jake noticed that she seemed disappointed by Lisa's willingness to cooperate peacefully. He began to suspect that the Federation agent wanted an excuse to use force against people who had been harboring a fugitive. Barnes ordered her troops to secure Lisa using restraints that looked more like torture devices than standard prisoner equipment. The metal bands that locked around Lisa's wrists and ankles were designed to suppress her enhanced abilities, while delivering painful shocks if she attempted to resist. Jake protested the treatment, but Barnes told him that enhanced humans required special handling for everyone's safety. As the soldiers prepared to load Lisa onto one of their transports, Barnes revealed the real reason for her aggressive approach. She told Jake that anyone who knowingly harbored a Federation fugitive was subject to criminal charges and property seizure under military law. The ranch could be confiscated, and its workers arrested as accessories to Lisa's crimes. Jake realized that Barnes was using Lisa's capture as an excuse to seize valuable frontier property for the Federation. New Montana's agricultural output was becoming increasingly important as the galaxy's population grew, and the Federation had been looking for ways to gain direct control over food production. Lisa's presence on the ranch gave them the legal justification they needed to take over Jake's operation. Barnes offered Jake a choice that was designed to look generous, while actually giving him no real options. He could cooperate fully with the Federation investigation and accept a government contract to run his ranch under their supervision. In exchange, his criminal charges would be dropped, and he would be allowed to keep a small percentage of his property's profits. Jake knew that accepting Barnes's offer would make him little more than a hired manager on land that had been his life's work. But refusing would mean losing everything and possibly facing imprisonment on charges that could be manufactured to fit whatever outcome the Federation desired. Barnes had clearly planned this operation to give him no choice but surrender. That was when Pete Williams and the other ranch hands made their own choice about where their loyalties lay. Instead of distancing themselves from their employers, troubles they gathered around Jake in a show of solidarity that surprised even him. Pete announced that if the Federation wanted to take their boss and Lisa, they would have to go through all of them first. Mary Johnson emerged from the ranch house carrying a rifle that had belonged to Jake's father. The older woman had never shown any interest in weapons before, but she held the gun with steady hands and determination that made Barnes take notice. Other workers appeared from barns and outbuildings carrying tools and weapons that might not match Federation military hardware, but represented a willingness to fight for their home. Barnes looked around at the assembled ranch workers with something approaching respect mixed with frustration. She had clearly expected Jake to surrender meekly when faced with overwhelming force, but instead found herself confronting people who were prepared to defend their way of life. The situation was escalating beyond her original plans. Lisa broke the tension by speaking directly to Barnes for the first time since the agent's arrival. She told Barnes that the Federation's claims about her being a murderer were lies designed to justify her capture and return to a program she had escaped for good reasons. Lisa offered to prove her innocence if Barnes would agree to hear evidence that contradicted the official reports. Barnes refused to consider Lisa's offer and ordered her troops to proceed with the arrest operation. But as the soldiers moved to secure, their prisoner alarms began sounding from their ships. The transport vessel's sensors had detected incoming contacts that were not showing Federation identification codes. Something else was approaching New Montana with intentions that remained unknown. Jake watched as Barnes received reports through her communication equipment that made her expression change from confidence to concern. The incoming ships were not responding to Federation hails, and their approach vector suggested they were preparing for combat operations. Barnes found herself facing a threat she had not anticipated while trying to maintain control over a situation that was already beyond her original parameters. Lisa looked up at the sky with enhanced senses that could detect details invisible to normal humans. Her expression grew grim as she identified the approaching vessels and realized that Jake's ranch was about to become a battlefield. She told Barnes that the Kethmori Empire had found her, and that everyone on the planet was now in danger from aliens who wanted her abilities for their own purposes. Barnes faced a choice between continuing her arrest operation and preparing to defend against an alien attack that could devastate the entire colony. The Federation agent realized that her mission had suddenly become much more complicated than simply capturing a fugitive and returning to headquarters with a successful operation. The electrical storm hit New Montana without warning during the height of summer, when the atmosphere was already charged with energy from the twin suns. Jake was in his study reviewing supply orders when the first lightning bolt struck close, enough to shake the house. Within minutes, the storm had grown into something far worse than the night Lisa had first arrived at his door. Lightning came down in sheets of white fire that turned the darkness into brief moments of blinding daylight. Thunder rolled across the grasslands like artillery fire, and the wind picked up with enough force to bend the stronger trees almost to the breaking point. Jake checked his weather monitoring equipment and saw readings that made his blood run cold. This storm was generating electromagnetic pulses strong enough to damage electronic systems. The ranch's defense grid began failing within the first hour. The automated sensors that watched for predators and intruders started going offline one by one as lightning strikes overloaded their circuits. The communication array that kept Jake in contact with his hands scattered across the property went dead completely. Even the backup power systems were struggling to maintain basic functions in the house and barn. Pete's voice came through on one of the few working radios reporting that the cattle were panicking worse than he had ever seen. The electromagnetic interference was affecting their neural implants that helped keep them calm and grouped together. Without those implants working properly, the animals were scattering in all directions, driven by instinctive fear of the violent storm. Jake tried to reach Lisa on her radio but got only static in response. He last knew she was working on fence repairs in the eastern section of the ranch, where some of the most valuable breeding stock was kept. That area would be completely vulnerable now with the defense grid down and the cattle running wild with fear. The situation became critical when Pete reported massive predator readings on the few sensors still functioning. Something big was moving toward the ranch from the wild lands, taking advantage of the storm and the disabled defenses. Jake grabbed his rifle and emergency gear, preparing to head out into the chaos. But he knew that even with all his hands working, together they might not be able to protect the scattered herds. That was when Lisa's voice came through on a frequency that should not have been possible. Her signal was clear and strong, cutting through the electromagnetic interference like it was not even there. She reported that she was in the eastern pasture and could see a massive creature approaching the breeding stock. Her description made Jake's heart sink because she was talking about a storm stalker. Storm stalkers were the apex predators of New Montana, standing 8 feet tall with claws that could cut through steel and hide thick enough to stop most rifle rounds. They normally avoided human settlements, but electrical storms drove them into feeding frenzies that made them incredibly dangerous. A single storm stalker could kill dozens of cattle and any humans unlucky enough to get in its way. Jake tried to tell Lisa to retreat and wait for backup, but her response shocked him into silence. She said she was going to stop the creature and protect the cattle. Before Jake could argue, she cut the communication and left him listening to static. He knew that sending one person against a storm stalker was suicide, but there was nothing he could do to help her with the defense grid down and the storm raging around them. What happened next would change everything Jake thought he knew about his mysterious employee. Lisa moved to intercept the storm stalker as it approached the panicked cattle, and what she did defied every law of physics and biology that Jake understood. She moved faster than any human could possibly move, turning into a blur of motion that the creature could barely track. The storm stalker was a killing machine evolved over millions of years to hunt and destroy, but Lisa fought it like she was built for this exact purpose. She dodged claws that moved faster than striking snakes and landed blows that staggered a creature weighing over a ton. Her hands seemed to glow with energy that left burns on the stalker's armored hide, and her movements showed strength that should have been impossible. Jake watched the battle through his binoculars from as close as he dared to approach and could barely believe what he was seeing. Lisa was not just fighting the storm stalker, she was winning against odds that should have made victory impossible. Her combat skills went beyond anything human training could produce, and her physical capabilities were clearly enhanced far beyond normal limits. The fight ended when Lisa grabbed the storm stalker's massive head and did something that made the creature's eyes glow with the same energy Jake had seen around her hands. The stalker collapsed instantly, as if its brain had simply stopped working. Lisa stood over its body, breathing hard but apparently uninjured, despite fighting the most dangerous predator on the planet. But the most shocking revelation came when Lisa turned her attention to the ranch's disabled defense systems. She approached the control hub that had been fried by lightning strikes and placed her hands on the dead machinery. Jake watched in amazement as the systems began responding to her touch, coming back online with capabilities that exceeded their original specifications. The defense grid activated with modifications that Lisa was implementing in real time, making the entire system more sophisticated and powerful than the manufacturers had ever intended. Sensors came online with enhanced range and accuracy, while automated weapon systems gained targeting capabilities that would have required quantum computers to process. Lisa was interfacing directly with the technology, using abilities that no normal human possessed. Jake realized he was watching someone who was not entirely human doing things that redefined what he thought was possible. Lisa had revealed abilities that went far beyond enhanced physical capabilities into territory that suggested she was some kind of technological hybrid. The way she controlled the ranch's systems indicated a direct neural interface with computer networks. When the storm finally passed, Jake found Lisa sitting by the dead stormstalker, looking exhausted but alert. He approached her carefully, not sure what to say or how to react to what he had witnessed. Lisa looked up at him with eyes that seemed different now, as if she had dropped a mask she had been wearing since her arrival. Jake asked her directly what she really was, and Lisa hesitated before answering. She told him she was a prototype enhanced human soldier, created in laboratories on Earth for deep space military operations. Her genetic structure had been modified to provide superhuman physical capabilities, while neural implants gave her the ability to interface directly with any computer system. Lisa explained that she had been part of an experimental unit designed for reconnaissance and combat missions in hostile environments. Her enhanced metabolism allowed her to function on minimal sleep, while her improved reflexes and strength made her an ideal soldier for frontier warfare. The neural interface technology let her take control of enemy systems and gather intelligence in ways that conventional forces could not match. Jake listened to her explanation with growing understanding of why she had been so secretive about her past. Enhanced humans were controversial throughout the galaxy, with many groups considering them abominations that threatened the natural order. If her true nature became known, she would face prejudice and possibly persecution from people who feared what she represented. When Jake asked why she had left the military, Lisa's expression darkened. She told him that her unit had been disbanded after what she called an incident that she was not willing to discuss in detail. Rather than face decommissioning, she had deserted and spent months moving from world to world trying to find a place where she could live peacefully. Jake found himself feeling protective of Lisa, despite the shocking revelation about her true nature. She had used her extraordinary abilities to protect his ranch and his cattle, risking exposure to save lives and property. Whatever she had been created for, she had chosen to use her gifts to help rather than harm. That choice mattered more to him than the circumstances of her origin. Lisa asked Jake if he wanted her to leave now that he knew what she really was. She said she would understand if he felt uncomfortable having an enhanced human working on his ranch. Her resignation was quiet and dignified, but Jake could see the pain in her eyes at the thought of having to run again. Jake's answer surprised both of them. He told Lisa that as far as he was concerned, she had earned her place on the ranch through hard work and dedication. Her genetic modifications and technological enhancements did not change the fact that she was a good person who had proven herself trustworthy. He offered her permanent employment and a chance to build a real life on New Montana. For the first time since Jake had known her, Lisa smiled with genuine happiness. She accepted his offer and promised that she would do everything in her power to protect the ranch and everyone on it. Jake believed her completely because he had seen what she was capable of when people she cared about were threatened.